the darkest corners of Appalachia, there are names locals refuse to speak after sunset. Not because they've forgotten, but because remembering is too dangerous. One of those names is Porter. For more than a century, whispers of the Porter clan have haunted the valleys and ridges of eastern Kentucky, where families vanish without a trace and hunters swear they've heard something moving just beyond the firelight. The Porters weren't always monsters, at least, not in the beginning. Records show that they were once part of a small, isolated farming community in the late 1800s. Like many families scraping out survival in the mountains, they struggled through famine, disease, and bitter winters. But unlike their neighbors, the Porters chose a path most wouldn't dare. When the crops failed and the livestock starved, the clan turned on their own. The first to die were the sick, the weak, the ones who couldn't work the land. Instead of burying them, the family feasted. By the time word spread to nearby towns, it was too late. The Porters had already vanished deep into the mountains, abandoning what little homestead they had. All that remained was a cabin full of bones, stripped of flesh, arranged carefully in spirals across the dirt floor. Locals say the sheriff who discovered the scene refused to speak of it again, resigning his post the following week. From then on, the Porters were no longer seen as human. They became a curse. Mothers warned their children never to wander too far from home, for fear the Porters might snatch them away. Hunters who dared to track deer through the hollows sometimes found crude traps, made of sharpened branches. Traps meant not for animals, but for men. The 1920s brought one of the earliest modern encounters. A railroad crew laying track through a remote stretch of mountain reported strange thefts. Tools went missing, food disappeared overnight, and once, an entire mule was dragged off into the trees. One worker, a man named Elijah Parks, claimed he saw figures watching from the ridge, barefoot, long-haired, their eyes gleaming with a feral hunger. That same week, Elijah vanished. His body was never found, but the crew stumbled upon a fire pit nearby, filled with blackened bones. By the 1940s, the legend of the Porter clan had grown more grotesque. Soldiers returning from the war brought stories of local boys who never came back from squirrel hunting trips. Families whispered that the Porters had bred among themselves for decades, creating twisted generations with deformed faces and animal-like strength. Some described them as barely human, their speech reduced to guttural noises, their skin pale as ash from living too long in caves and hollows where sunlight never touched. But what set the Porters apart from other Appalachian horror was their cruelty. They weren't just cannibals, they were hunters of men. Survivors told tales of being stalked for days, hearing mocking laughter in the woods, voices mimicking their own cries. One hunter, half-starved and delirious, stumbled out of the mountains in the 1950s, babbling that the Porters had strung his companions upside down in the trees, carving them piece by piece while still alive. Locals dismissed him as mad. Searchers found the bloodstains exactly where he claimed. The 1970s saw a resurgence of fear when hikers began vanishing from the Appalachian Trail near Porter territory. One couple's campsite was discovered with the tent slashed to ribbons, blood pooled across the dirt, and their supplies untouched. The only clue was a set of barefoot prints leading back into the trees, prints too large for a man, yet too human to be an animal. State police investigated, but the case was quietly closed without explanation. By the 1990s, the Porters had become an almost supernatural presence. Campfire stories described them as shadowy figures who moved without sound, able to appear and disappear at will. Conspiracy theorists claimed they had made a pact with something older than the mountains themselves, a bargain that allowed them to endure where other clans had withered and died. The evidence, despite more than a century of inbreeding, disease, and bloodshed, the Porters only seemed stronger. Their legend refused to fade. And then came the chilling discovery in 2002. A group of spelunkers exploring a cavern system near Breathitt County stumbled across a chamber littered with gnawed bones, some animal, many unmistakably human. In the center of the chamber lay a crude altar, built from stacked skulls. Carved into the rock above it was a single word: Porter. The spelunkers fled in terror, but only 3 of the 5 made it back to town. The other 2, David Harrell and Lisa Gentry, were never seen again. Authorities sealed off the cave, claiming it was unstable, but the surviving spelunkers swore they heard something following them in the darkness, laughter, guttural and mocking, that echoed off the stone walls. By the 2010s, the internet breathed new life into the legend. Reddit threads, YouTube horror channels, and podcasts spread the tales of the Porter clan to audiences far beyond Appalachia. Some dismissed them as campfire fiction, but others insisted the Porters were real and still active. Sightings poured in, pale figures crossing logging roads at night, guttural voices caught on audio recorders, campsites torn apart with claw-like slashes. And always, the same detail returned: bones arranged in spirals. The Porters were no longer just a backwoods horror story. They were evolving, adapting, becoming something more than human. Hunters claimed their strength was unmatched, their endurance inhuman. Survivors described eyes that gleamed in the dark, not with hunger, but with a cruel intelligence. As the 2020s began, whispers grew louder. The Porters weren't just hiding anymore. They were watching, they were waiting. And those who stumbled into their hollow might not return, not because they were eaten, but because they were kept. For what purpose? No one dared to guess. By the time the second decade of the 21st century rolled around, the Porter clan had shifted from whispered legend to an obsession for outsiders. Paranormal investigators, urban explorers, and true crime enthusiasts all wanted to be the one to find them. What none of them understood was that the Porters didn't need finding. They chose who saw them, and when in 2013, a local hunter named James Colburn stumbled into one of the clan's lairs. He had tracked a deer deep into the woods when he found himself in a hollow unlike any he'd seen before. Bones littered the ground, strung up in the trees like grotesque ornaments. In the center stood a crude shelter of sticks and mud, its roof lined with strips of dried flesh. He swore he heard whispers coming from inside, a chorus of voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize. James turned and fled, but as he ran, he realized he was being followed. Barefoot steps thudded against the earth behind him, yet, when he dared to look back, the forest was empty. Colburn told no one but his brother. 3 weeks later, his body was found hanging upside down from a sycamore tree. Gutted like game, the 2010s became a dangerous decade for anyone who ventured too close. Groups of college students camping in the Appalachian foothills reported hearing children laughing outside their tents at night, only to find small handprints smeared in blood across the canvas come morning. A fisherman on the Red River swore he saw a figure crawling on all fours across the opposite bank, its movements jerky, almost insect-like. And in 2016, a missing persons report shocked the region. A family of 4 vanished while driving through Breathitt County. Their car was found abandoned on a logging road, doors open, headlights still on. Inside, the only clue was a spiral of animal bones laid neatly on the back seat. But it was the footage from 2018 that reignited national fear. A group of amateur filmmakers known for ghost hunting uploaded a video titled Porter Hollow Expedition for the first 5 minutes. The footage was uneventful, just woods, jokes, and nervous laughter. But then, the camera caught something staggering. A pale figure crouching in the branches above, watching silently. Seconds later, the group heard guttural voices mimicking their own laughter from somewhere deep in the woods. The film ended abruptly with the camera dropping to the ground, pointed upward at a canopy of trees. A pale, gaunt face leaned in to frame, its eyes black, its jaw distended. The channel was deleted within days. The filmmakers were never seen again. By now, the Porter clan was no longer just a story of hunger and survival. They had become something darker, more deliberate. Witnesses described them as sadistic, toying with their victims, mimicking their voices, and arranging grisly displays. Some claimed the porters no longer lived like men, but like predators, moving in coordinated packs, hunting in silence. Others whispered that the clan was no longer entirely human at all. In 2020, a construction company attempted to clear a section of land for a new logging road in Porter territory. Within weeks, the project shut down after a series of unexplained accidents. Workers reported tools vanishing, tires slashed, and strange sounds echoing through the trees, low chanting, screams, even their own names whispered back to them. One bulldozer was found overturned in the forest, its cabin smeared with blood. No body was ever recovered. The company quietly withdrew, citing budget concerns. But the most chilling evidence emerged just last year, when a drone operator flying over the Appalachian woods captured footage that went viral. At first it showed nothing but dense forest. Then, faintly, a clearing came into view. Dozens of figures huddled around a massive bonfire. Their bodies were twisted, their movements jerky, their faces blurred, as if they weren't meant to be seen. In the firelight, one lifted its head toward the drone and opened its mouth impossibly wide. The feed, cut to static, .debunkers, called it fake. Locals knew better. One thing had become clear: the porters were not a dying bloodline. They were thriving. The inbreeding, instead of weakening them, seemed to have produced something resilient, something adapted to the shadows. Their bodies were deformed, but their instincts were sharp, their cruelty unmatched. And in the silence of the Appalachian hollows, they had built something akin to a kingdom of bone and blood. Survivors described strange symbols carved into trees, arranged in spirals and circles. They spoke of hearing multiple voices, chanting the same words in unison, the sound carrying across valleys. Hunters swore they'd stumbled upon mounds of bones arranged like altars, skulls placed at the top like trophies. And in every account, the porters were never far, always watching, always waiting. What terrified locals most wasn't what the porters did to their victims. It was the belief that they were preparing for something. That all of these grotesque displays, the spirals, the chanting, the bonfires were rituals. Not just for sustenance, but for worship. Worship of what? Some whispered it was the land itself. Others said it was something older, something they had bound themselves to in exchange for survival. Whatever the truth, the porters weren't merely hunters of men anymore. They were priests of something darker, and their church was the hollow itself. By the 2020s, the Porter clan had become more than folklore. They had become a specter-haunting Appalachia presence you didn't speak of, a shadow at the edge of every campfire. But as technology grew, so did the risks. Smartphones, drones, and live streams meant that the porters couldn't hide forever. Or maybe, worse yet, they didn't want to. The first sign came in 2021, when two hikers live-streamed their trek through eastern Kentucky. For most of the day, the feed was uneventful sunlight through trees, birdsong, laughter. Then, late in the evening, viewers watching live began flooding the comments. "Who's that behind you?" The hikers spun around, but the camera showed only trees. Minutes later, the audio picked up faint laughter, familiar, because it was the hikers' own voices, repeated back to them in a guttural mockery. The feed cut out abruptly. Their bodies were never found by 2022. Law enforcement could no longer ignore the growing number of missing persons tied to the area, but every attempt to investigate ended in failure. Deputies complained of equipment malfunctioning, radios dying, compasses spinning wildly. One search party swore they found a clearing filled with spirals of bones. Yet, when they returned with backup, the clearing was gone, swallowed by the forest. The sheriff eventually sealed the case files, dismissing them as accidents. Privately, he admitted, "You can't investigate what doesn't want to be found." Local legends took a darker turn. The porters weren't just described as cannibals anymore. They were said to be something other. Hunters reported seeing them move unnaturally fast, scaling trees with insect-like agility. Survivors spoke of eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, jaws that unhinged wider than human anatomy should allow. The inbreeding hadn't weakened them. It had transformed them, and then came the most disturbing story yet. In late 2023, a delivery truck broke down on a remote back road near Breathitt County. The driver, stranded with no signal, left his cab to search for help. Hours later, his truck was found abandoned, doors open, headlights still on, in the dirt nearby. Investigators discovered something chilling, a spiral of bones, laid out neatly, with the driver's hat at the center. The driver's body has never been recovered, but perhaps the most terrifying evidence of the Porter clan's survival came from a drone operator just months ago. Flying over the Appalachian ridges, he captured footage of what appeared to be a massive gathering. Dozens, possibly hundreds of pale, twisted figures moved in circles around a roaring bonfire. Their chanting echoed through the valley, a guttural rhythm that seemed almost ritualistic. In the center of the fire stood something massive, a structure woven from bones and antlers, its shape resembling a throne. The footage ends with one of the figures lifting its head toward the drone. Its eyes reflected the firelight. Its jaw opened wide, and then static. When the operator retrieved the drone, its camera was smashed, the memory card missing. What circulated online was only a fragment, uploaded anonymously. Even so, it was enough to terrify thousands. By now, the Porter clan had achieved something horrifying. They had become more than hunters. They had become symbols. To locals, they were a curse you avoided at all costs. To outsiders, they were a fascination, a challenge, a dare. But to those who entered their territory, they were death. What makes the Porter legend so chilling is not just their violence. It's their purpose. Every spiral of bones, every guttural chant, every victim displayed like an offering suggests that the Porters aren't simply surviving, they're worshipping something ancient, something buried deep in the roots of Appalachia, something that gives back to them in exchange for blood. Some say it is the land itself. Others claim it is an old god, a demon that whispers in the caves and hollow trees. Whatever it is, the Porters have bound themselves to it, and they've endured for generations, untouched by the outside world. The terrifying truth is this: the Porter clan has not disappeared. They are still out there, watching, waiting, multiplying. Their rituals grow bolder, their displays more grotesque. And as the world keeps intruding through drones, cameras, explorers, the Porters seem to be sending a message. They aren't hiding anymore. They are preparing. And one night, when the fires burn brightest in those forgotten hills, when the chanting rises above the treetops, the Porters won't just take another lost hiker or another unlucky hunter. They'll come down from their hollow in numbers, and the world will remember their name. The Porters, not a family, not a clan, a curse that never dies. If you thought the story of the Porter clan was terrifying, just wait until you hear what's hiding in the next hollow. The hills of Appalachia are filled with even darker secrets, and I'll be uncovering them very soon. So, if you're brave enough, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap the bell icon, and drop a comment telling me which part of this story disturbed you the most. I read every single one. And remember, the woods are never empty. Something is always watching.